know what you're talking about, and all this and that. And I said, let me hit up Paris because Paris is more mature than to see skin color. He will
Mm,
know to look at the evidence of the case to know that this is murder, man.
for sure, man. I appreciate you wanting to reach out. I know we've been trying to connect for a while, man. I wanna it's a it's a situation that really we have not we've seen before. None of this stuff that is really new. And I'm not talking about the particular specifics of the case. We'll get into that, but we've seen this white versus black versus white dynamic. When someone's being killed or someone's being hurt, and instead of looking at what actually happened, folks immediately pick sides.
Right.
Um, and we know that I try to operate under the idea that in God's kingdom, all right, race is not a determination, and really God is not a respecter of persons. What it means by that, He's not respecter of race. He's not respective of financial,
Right.
standing. Popularity, resumes. None of that matters. Because God looks at the heart, while we look at the outward appearance, right? But God looks at the heart. So I
Yes,
want
sir.
to to start our conversation um with those criterias, with those outline of how we're going to get into it. Also, we also know that we're in a time where we have a president with many people feel is racist. Have felt that time ever since he was a president the first go around. And then we also have the issue of the illegal immigrant deportations going on
Right.
in mass. And we have folks that believe that is another form of racism. We have the elimination of DEI programming in jobs and schools, which is another thing. People that feel like is a form of racism. So, with that backdrop in society, um, we can then go and take a look at this specific situation and see what the mindset of people are toward it. But really, I believe that this particular situation, as all the other racial situations that promoted by the media, really were done to promote a greater end that they're trying to push us to. Um, we can get into that, man. So I guess you know the situation as the facts have shown. Well, and also, man, there's a lot of stuff on the social media that has a lot of false information. Have you seen that?
Yes, sir. He was punched and all this and that. That was proven to be debunked. What happened was someone made a fake account acting like the chief of police in Frisco, Texas. I
Mm-mm.
mean, just to prove that, just to make that kid look bad, man. I mean, it's insane to me.
It's very interesting. So I believe all this stuff is made to cause division on both sides of their platform. And I've said many times is they trade situations where they make heroes out of black folks, all right, who are doing wrong, right? That then causes all the black people to want to defend someone who's doing wrong. But then what that further does is if you're not really locked in spiritually as a white person, that can make you not like black people simply because of the reaction that was created through the idea that there's some type of innocent victim when they're not. So what
Exactly.
all that does is it makes black people dislike white people more, and then it makes white people dislike black people even more, right? And all that
Absolutely.
does is cause division. Now,
Absolutely. But we look at the souls, man. Like you were saying at the beginning, we're mature enough to look at the souls, look at the evidence, and then like look and make our case from there. Like
yeah,
you can't base everything off. If the roles were reversed and Austin had stabbed Anthony in this manner. I would
Right,
say Austin's in the wrong. He had the knife. He
right,
was at the track meet with the knife. He
right.
sat under the wrong tent. He did all the wrong moves. So if the roles were reversed, uh, you got to say Austin's in the wrong until proven guilty. And I think that's what all people are saying. Is like, look, both sides is basically saying, look, let all the evidence come out. But the one who holds the cards, in my opinion, is the one that's on Austin's side, is because he's the victim here, and that's what we're losing the side of.
Yeah. I can only imagine what it looked like had the black young man been the one who got stabbed to death.
Oh
I'm sure
man.
that there'd be riots going on in the streets.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which even if a black person is really innocent and really is killed by a white person or a police officer or whatever, even with that being said, even in those cases that we for us to be so upset simply because someone was killed by someone of a different color of their skin, when we know that any black person that grew up in any inner city in America knows that the number one threat to our lives are other people that look like us, and there's no one that ever grew up in any major black neighborhood in their entire lives cannot would be lying if they said that that is not their experience if they grew up in a high crime area. And many times in the life that I live now, when I think back of how I grew up, where I grew up, to be honest, it almost feels like I lived a parallel life. It's almost like, was that did I really live that? How did I survive that? Why, how come I'm not traumatized still? Because just the thought of always having to walk around and watching your back and feeling unsafe and having to worry about getting killed or getting robbed or getting jumped or all those things for years. You know what I mean? This was something I had to worry about for years, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, as a young adult living in the same community in my 20s. And then having friends getting killed. You know what I mean? Having things happen. Um, and it was never any white people that was doing it. It was just us. So we have to be honest about that fact. And if we're going to feel justified to get mad when someone from outside the community does something to one of us, then we should be doubly mad when someone from the community that does one of us. Because at the end of the day, one thing we can't always control what other people do, but what we can control is what we do. And if we want to say that we live in this racist country, right? Okay. If you want to say, I remember there was a post years ago, and it was, I don't know if it was a real post, probably wasn't, but apparently there's a letter from someone who was in the KKK. And in that letter, they were thanking black folks, and they said that you guys killed each other. You guys have eliminated so many of each other that there's no need for the KKK. There's no need for us to do anything. You've done it yourselves.
Wow.
And I think that's telling.
Wow. That's chilling. Yeah. And we're like when you until we can have these tough conversations about each other, I don't think we can get anywhere because if a white person brings up the culture, like you was just speaking of about it being violent, then you're labeled a racist and whatnot. But you're just pointing out that hey, it's a violent culture, and you can add to it, Paris. And I don't know how you feel about this, but it's enticed by violent music.
Oh, 100%. Well, the we know that the powers that be, right, are controlled by the devil. We know that the devil is the power and the ruler of this world system, this system that we live in. The what we call the beast system, what we call the Babylonian system, where it's not just one country, it's the entire world.
Right.
However, with that also being said, we know that America, we talk about mystery Babylon, and America itself is one who's really been able to promote high levels of evil around the world like never before that we've seen. And folks talk a lot about end time prophecy, and they talk about waiting for a beast system. My argument is that we are already in the beast system. It's just the beast system is just coming to its climax, but we're not waiting for something different. No, we've been in the beast system. This is the antichrist system, and within this system, What it does is through media, through music, is that it creates a culture, because you got to realize that hip hop culture that promotes violence and death and destruction, that hip hop culture has been all around the world. If you go to China, the Chinese kids know all the rap lyrics. If you go to India, the India kids know all the rap lyrics. So this system has been brought all over the world. I'll get back to the root of that later on in the conversation. But you're exactly right. The music is influencing young people to develop certain attitudes that go against God's righteousness. I know for me, I grew up, for rap music, I was more into the money and the women, right? So that's what influenced me through the music. And chasing women and all those things had negative consequences for me. Some other people took on the gangster part of the music, being in gangs, carrying guns, being in violence, and that led to negative consequences to their lives. So there's 100% that the music does a huge part in terms of mindset, but the music is just a portion and a part of media. And when you mentioned the fake Facebook page of the police chief, so you may assume, and most people maybe assume that that was done by a black person, or a black person, someone supporting a black person or supporting this young man's family. I'll take it a step further. I believe that the same powers that be did that. I don't believe it was an individual person. I don't believe it was even the kid's family. I
Interesting.
believe it could have even been a white person.
Uh-huh.
It could, but who it was someone in power who wanted to further stoke the flames of misinformation.
Till people understand we're not moved by skin color. The Bible tells us that the spirit needs to control the flesh because that's where it's at. You're either a demon or you're holy. So
Right,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the race. Like if a white person did it, he's trying to make it look as if he's just trying to maybe get clicks. He's trying to start something, a race war or whatever. And if a black guy did it, he's supporting the killer. So it's not. It's evil. It's evil. It's a spirit moving that. The flesh can't do anything on that, as you said coming into this, Paris. So
yeah,
like until we can understand, we can have these conversations because it doesn't come down to if our skin is brown, if our skin is peach. That has nothing to do with it. Paul said that. Paul says you're not battling with the flesh, but the spirits, right?
spirit,
So
yes, sir.
that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with spirits. That's why you and I can identify because me and you can talk, and we know I'm not talking to a black guy. I'm talking to a fellow
Right,
brother in heaven. And that's what it's
right,
when they came to Jesus and said, "Your mother and your daughter, or excuse me, your sister waits for you outside." He said, "Who is my mother and my sister? My mother
right.
and sister is those that do the will of the Father in heaven." So he
Yes,
didn't say that's telling you that you could be green or red or whatever, as long as you follow the will of God, then you're with Jesus. So people's got it twisted, man. Until we
yeah.
can have these conversations based off of spirits and not skin color, we can't get anywhere.
Can't get anywhere. No, 100%. God he says that we are have righteous judgment. And we are to look at things, from a righteous standpoint. And, it's unfortunate because the young man, both these young men lost their lives. Austin lost his life, but this other Carmelo young man, he's going to be going to jail for probably the
Right.
rest of his life, for just a bad decision. And a bad decision. And that the sad thing about these situations, especially within the black community, is that a lot of times these situations could be used as cautionary tales to tell other young people to not fall into these type of scenarios. There was something that's been on social media this week, and it was a grandmama with a young 16 or 17-year-old young man who had went to jail, going to jail for murder. And I don't know if you saw that, and she was in the room and she was hugging
Yes,
him
sir.
and talking to him and was like, there's nothing that we can do. You're gonna
Right.
have to deal with the consequences of your actions. And the kid, man, he's about 16 years old, and he just started crying and just wailing. And even though he killed somebody, the way he was, crying and in tears, it still hit me because it was real tears of desperation, and and it was no way out. There's no way to change your situation. And
Right.
grandma talked about how they try to get him to change and try to help him and get him on the right path before this happened. And when these situations happen, we need to be talking to our young black men about not moving in this way, not because the consequences can cost you all your life and your potential, and it can destroy whatever destiny that God has for your life. We just talk. I talked to someone about the Breonna Stewart situation, and if we recall, I was living in Louisville during that time, and I think we had plenty of conversations and
Yes, sir.
and podcast on those
Yep.
situations. And the thing
Right.
that got me was the missed opportunity to talk to our young black girls about the type of young men that they were dating and get relationships with, because it could cost you your life. And everyone was talking about the police busting in there and what happened. But I said, more than likely, that what happens more time than not is there's other black people busting in your crib because they know that you sell drugs or you got money, and they're looking to rob you, and they start shooting. And if your girlfriend's there, they'll shoot the girlfriend. I remember in Boston when I first started in youth ministry, and I was at this mega church. Right outside the mega church, there was a murder, a mass shooting, a murder. It was called the Boston Massacre. And what
Mm.
happened was this guy, he was selling drugs. He had his girlfriend over there, the girlfriend's baby, and these two guys had just got out of jail. Decided they was gonna run up in the crib and rob him. So they ran up in the crib, they robbed him. They got one guy was coming in to buy some weed or something. They shot him. They shot the drug dealer. They made everybody go outside in the street and strip. And
Mm.
they even shot and killed the girlfriend and the baby.
Oh man.
They shot the baby. She was holding the baby, and they shot the baby and shot her through the baby.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
remember I was at the funeral because they had the funeral at the church because the church, I won't get into this, but the church decided it was a great opportunity to promote themselves through that tragedy because they was right there, right? So now,
Right.
they we're out in the community and all the foolishness that they do. But anyway, they had the funeral, and I can never get out my mind of the woman in the casket with the baby's body on top of her.
Mm. Mm-mm.
And
That's tough.
you
That's tough.
know, when I think about those things, um, I think about all folks. The girl and the baby were innocent.
Hmm.
She was just messing with the wrong person in a
Right.
relationship with the wrong person. And even though he was drug dealing, drug dealing doesn't deserve a death penalty either.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? But because our moral compass in the black community has been so shifted away from the things of God, where money and all these evil things are celebrated, right? Um, we need voices to go against that. We don't need people to reinforce negative behavior or try to excuse the consequences, because God uses consequences to
Hmm.
to show that his way is right and the other way is wrong. And the Bible says is that the wages of sin is death.
Well, absolutely. I would like to see a study, and I know the answer to the question, and you do too, Paris. If these kids all put on whatever type of Christian music they like, and listen and let God go into them, you wouldn't have this violence you running around, would you? You would have love.
Well, if well, man, that goes into a whole nother story because these black Christian artists are suspect too, because a lot of them, or even if they're in the Christian music or Christian hip hop or whatever genre, a lot of them really want to be accepted by the greater musical
Mm.
genre. And
Right.
one person being, I watched his interview with Lecrae 2 days ago, and one of the most popular Christian rappers, if not the most popular Christian rapper,
Right.
um, and he in one video was talking about going to the Diddy parties and
Mm.
seeing all types of illicit sexual behavior.
Mm.
This was 2 years ago. He did this interview.
Mm-hmm.
He did an interview just a couple of days ago where he went up there and said he never saw anything and people shouldn't be attacking him for attending those parties. But somebody played back the clip of what he said 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these Christian artists,
Wow.
they're also compromised because you
Yeah.
got to see the Bible says that in these last days, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, selfish. And what happens is that even someone who should be a role model
Mm-hmm.
and an example, right, of a Christian black man has gotten off the road. See, we're living in, that's why I said people are waiting for this antichrist system. But the Bible says that an adulterous generation will be waiting for a sign, but no sign will come. The sign of Jonah has already been given. And what he's saying is that I've already showed you what happens when you are unrepentant, when you're
Mm-hmm.
rebellious.
Mm-hmm.
My word has already shown the consequence of that. So there's
Right.
no sign that's gonna come that people gonna be like, oh, okay, now, like no, it's already here. And the sad reality is that we missed out on these opportunities through these circumstances to teach righteousness. But we know that when the Bible talks about a
Mm-hmm.
famine in the end days, he's not talking about a physical famine of food, but the famine is of the truth of the word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said, remember, he said he's like you don't live just on bread alone, but on every word.
Right.
So the famine is of the word. There's no good teaching to eat. And then think about the black church. Think about this recent the Marvin Sapp situation. I love Marvin Sapp's music. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Marvin Sapp's music had got me through some tough times. I won't even lie. But see what happens in the black community. We inflate talent with righteousness,
Mm.
and we don't we can't decipher the two. And I want to take this a step further. This is something that um I don't think we've discussed on here.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to preface it, and I wanted to discuss all this other stuff and really make clear how we view things from a non-racial standpoint. Because I
Mm-hmm.
touch on this because what I'm about to say, could be viewed as racial, but once you break it down, you're going to understand that it's not racial. So I
Right.
truly believe that the Bible is a Black history book. I truly believe that the people in the Bible, including Jesus, was of blacks, was melanated,
Okay.
right? Of black pigment. All right. And with that being said, I also believe that according to Deuteronomy 28, that us were as the descendants of Israel are under a curse because the Bible has shown time and time again Israel went against God and served
Mm.
other gods time
Mm-hmm.
and time again, leading up to and to essentially begging the Romans to allow us to crucify the Savior. That was black folks that went to non-black folks, the Romans, and begged them to kill the Messiah.
Mm.
So, with that being said, the Bible talks about in Deuteronomy 28 the consequences of those things were us being taken enslaved from our original homeland and brought all over the world. And that's what you see. And we'd be brought all over the world, and we would always be the tail is not the head. We'd always be the last and not the first. And that was a divine judgment and a consequence for falling and going to serve other gods and going against God's true ways. Now, I do not even believe that what they call Israel today is
Mm-hmm.
actually even the land of Israel. I don't believe that. But that's for a whole nother conversation. But
Right.
with that being said, even with that belief, that does not give black people or people with pigmentation any further standing than people who don't have any pigmentation, because the Bible said that Jesus told those those Israelites, those in the New Testament, he told them y'all father is the devil. They said Abraham's our father. He said
Mm-hmm.
Abraham's not y'all's father, because if Abraham was your father, then you would follow God's son who sent me here to be a messenger. So you're not. So what he said was is that you can be a natural descendant all you want,
Mm-hmm.
but unless you follow God, like it means nothing. Like the verse you said earlier about who your brother and sister is. In the kingdom of heaven is no Jew nor Greek, no man, no female. So
Right.
anybody, anyone, you could be yellow with green polka dots and you can enter the kingdom of heaven.
Exactly. Exactly.
The reason why I bring up that historical evidence and as it relates to black people being the physical descendants is because we have to understand why we're in the situation we're in now. And if you understand why we're in the situation we're in now because of disobedience, instead of constantly pointing the finger at at society for our situation, we need to point the finger inwards to ourselves for our situation, because it's not the white man, it's not the United States government, it's not apartheid, it's not Jim Crow, it's not segregation, it's not slavery that did this to us. We did this to us thousands of years ago, and the Bible was clear about what would happen. And because the Bible is true, this is what happened.
Right.
And he said in Chronicles, if we repent and go back and follow God's ways, He will heal the land. But because we've not done that, he's allowed us to continue to be oppressed. Now, the nations that oppress us will be judged as well.
Right.
Will be so the other side of this, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, is that there was plenty of done to black people that was completely wrong. It may not be what we're seeing today, but we can't ignore times where blacks are beaten and killed, and simply for being black, we know those things happen.
Right. Right.
We can't deny those things, and we have to call those things evil as well.
Absolutely.
Um,
No doubt.
but when you have a spiritual understanding, you realize that those things were allowed because God either orchestrates or allows those things to happen.
Right.
And he allowed those things to happen because the Bible did, because we were chosen to be God's. Originally, God chose specific people out of the whole world to be his representatives,
Right.
and we failed. And in fact, like I said earlier about how the hip hop music goes around the world, the
Mm-hmm.
reason why is because we have that natural, powerful spirit. So it wasn't hip hop culture that we were supposed to spearhead around the world. We're supposed to spearhead kingdom culture
Mm.
all around the world.
Mm.
But we didn't do that. But
Right.
he said that the kingdom would be given to who? The Gentiles. So I want to be clear that even with that understanding, it does not make black people any better than white people or Chinese. There's no race that's any better than anyone. But I think that it's important to understand that, because as black people, it needs a call to repentance. And then I think for non-black people, I think it's important to understand the plight of black folk, because there's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of white folk who who are trying and really have good hearts.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of white people who feel that they want to help the black community,
Mm-hmm.
but because they don't understand why the black community is in the situation they are, they end
Yeah.
up doing things that actually hurt
Right.
the black community even more.
Makes sense.
Because as many black people are up in arms about this Karmelo Anthony situation, there's as many white liberals that's defending Karmelo Anthony just as much.
Right. Right. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah.
It may
You
even
said.
and you can answer this. I believe the white liberals have probably done more damage to race relations than even black people. What do you think?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Black Lives Matter, wasn't it started by a white liberal? I mean, he funded, and it's the same guy that funded the KKK. If that don't tell you all you need to know that he didn't have good intentions, then I don't know what will. But like in this case here, excuse me. Sorry, let me get back here. There you are. You got me,
Yeah.
Paris. Lost you
Yeah, you
there.
good. Mm-hmm. You're good.
Lost you there. Hang on. Can you hear me?
Yep, we good.
Okay. Yeah. With what we was talking about, like on this situation here, on this Texas situation, is everything that you just said. Like it makes sense. Like in leading light back to not just this situation, but several other situations throughout history of about maybe Charleston White came out recently. I don't know how you stand with Charleston White, but he came out recently and said that he believes that the black people is cursed like the biblical times said. Now
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and I didn't know at the time what he was speaking on. To hear you talk a little bit about it, I was like, okay, now I get a little bit more about what Charleston was saying,
Yeah.
and when he spoke about the situation. But when you look at this situation in Frisco, Texas, if you take race off the table, I think we should always take race off the table because your
Of course.
skin is just your earthly identity. That's
Yes.
it. It has nothing to do with who you are. Like it's just if you're either going to heaven or you're going to hell in the end, and your
That's it.
soul's going to pay the price for what your skin does if you can't get your skin under
100%.
control with the spirit. So it's
100%.
all you always want to have your spirit in line, uh, so it can control the flesh. Because if you let the
Mm-hmm.
flesh run, the flesh is going to be like, "Oh, this is my people. No, how
Mm-hmm.
dare you?" Like the
Mm-hmm.
flesh is just going to take over the spirit, and it's going to make it about race instead of what it's
Mm-hmm.
really about, the evidence in the case.
Right. 100%.
If you take the evidence in the case off the table just because of somebody's skin color, that's not good because now you're allowing the flesh to run the spirit. But if you let the spirit step up and say, hey, let's look at the evidence. If this guy was pink and this guy was purple, who's in the wrong and who's in the right?
100%.
That's how we have to view this. That's how God judges. He judges righteously, not like, oh, well, this is a black guy, this is a white guy, so I'm going to side with this guy or that guy. He doesn't work like that. He says, my ways is my ways, and my ways is
Mm-hmm.
not like yours. Because
Mm-hmm.
we judge based off of our skin color, our earthly identity. When we
Yeah.
die, that's why this body becomes a skeleton. Because if skin really
Mm.
mattered, why wouldn't we remain the same in the ground? We rot away. We
Right.
turn to the bones that we really are. All
Right.
of us turn to white bones. Let that
Yep.
sink in. All of us turn
Yep.
to white bones, white skeleton, white bones, all the way down to the ground. It's not different because we're not different. The only thing that makes us different is skin color. And that's the problem I think we're having right now in judging this case is, oh well, I'm looking at my earthly circumstances and
Yeah.
not looking at it from my heavenly circumstances. How
Yeah.
God views this is not how I'm viewing this. So you have to look at this. You have to take color off the table in any situation. Like I was in the comments having this conversation, and a black guy called me racist because of what I had said. And I
Mm.
asked him simply, I said, if Austin had been black, would you care about the matter at all? And he
Mm.
came back with like, well, Austin wasn't black. That's the problem here. Like
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
just pulled out his racism because he's looking
Yeah.
at it from the skin and not evidence. What I try to tell the guy, I said, look, I'm looking at this from right and wrong.
Right and
That's
wrong.
it, right and
That's it.
wrong, because that's all
That's
that
it.
matters. The spirit determines what's right and wrong. The flesh cannot determine that. You're
Yeah.
either right or you're wrong. You either got a killer in you or you don't. All of us have a killer in us. It's just a matter if we choose to use it or not.
100%.
And that's because free will. This young man, in my opinion, used free will to take another young man's life based off the evidence, Paris.
Yeah.
And you and I, you
Yeah.
may differ. You may differ. You
Yeah.
may look at the evidence. But if you look at the evidence until it, and then there's eyewitness testimonies on what happened, people inside the actual tent that seen what happened,
Yeah.
and then they put that out there, and they're like, they have gave this to the police in Frisco, Texas. They have this
Yeah.
information. They will be taking the stand at trial. So when you start putting all this together, and then you start looking at it, like Paris, if you and I is in a disagreement
Yeah.
and you push me, I don't got the right to stab you. I'm sorry. I can punch you
Right. Right.
or I
Right.
can
Right.
push you back.
Right.
But stab you? What did you do to me to warrant getting stabbed? That's my
Right.
problem here when you look at the evidence is that it doesn't warrant self-defense. It's unfortunate for Anthony, but I don't see a self-defense claim here.
I watched the video. It was so I watched two videos. I watched one from a white lawyer, and I watched one from a black lawyer. And both of those lawyers went over the self-defense law as it was written in Texas, right? Because those they're different in every state. Texas does have a stay in your law provision. However, both the white and the black lawyer going through the law essentially stated that there is literally no possibility for a self-defense claim in this circumstance. And they went through a lot of different. They went through the law and they broke it down in multiple different ways, so people can clearly see. Well, if that statute doesn't fit, let's look at this statute. And they went through every statute, and they went around all the different ways that you could possibly try to use a self-defense claim in a scenario, and none of them are justified,
No.
at all. He didn't try to flee the circumstance. It wasn't an equal amount of force. There was no deadly force applied prior. And then also there's a law that people don't understand. So that if me and you, if I say to you, hey, bro, let's step outside and fight. And we go outside and fight, and you start getting the best of me, and I pull out a knife and stab you. I can't say it's self-defense. And it goes beyond the fact that you didn't have a knife and I did.
Right.
The issue is that I asked for I was the word they use. I agreed upon. I forgot the legal word, but essentially I made essentially a contract or an agreement that we're going to go and have some type of physical altercation.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say, hey, if you do this, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, that's
See
provocation.
what I'm saying?
You invited me to a fight and you killed me. So
Right.
it's like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
like the witness that I was just speaking of earlier, they said that they heard him say after with what's been said in the media. On top of that, he said, "Punch me and see what happens." That's provocation.
Right. Right.
Provocation. I
You're
mean,
asking to get hit.
right.
So if you
So
if you ask to get hit and then are hit, even though he didn't get hit, but if you're asking, let's just say that there was actually a physical fight. If you're asking to get hit, then you're like you said, you're inviting a circumstance that you can't then justify by killing someone and going above legal force. So there's so many ways, man. I had a situation, man, a good friend of mine, man, when I was about 19 and 20 years old, I was up playing basketball in Manchester, New Hampshire. When I was playing at the school with Chris Brickley, famous NBA trainer, was my backup point guard. And I had a good friend, and he got into a circumstance where they were coming from a party or the club late at night. It was about 2 a.m. And, it was downtown, and, people were out walking around. People were drunk, being belligerent. And a Spanish kid, I guess they were at a red light, and they were drunk. And I guess they said something and was talking trash to my friend. And like I think maybe they kicked a car or something. I can't recall exactly what happened, but they were drunk and they were acting stupid. All right.
mhm.
My boy was about, I don't know how drunk my boy is, but he was driving, had a girl with him trying to get home. They're in the street acting crazy. Now what happened is he decided, they kicked the car, whatever, he drove off. He decided to drive off, turn the corner, and then come back to where those guys were.
Mm.
He told them and said, if you come and they was like, and I guess they try to hit him through the window. And he said, you try to hit me again, I'm gonna shoot you. They tried to do it again. He pulled out a gun and shot the dude in the head and killed him. So his defense was self-defense. But he
Wow.
ended up getting convicted because
He came back.
he had all the opportunity to get out the circumstance. Matter of fact, you drove off from the first assault. Then you decided to come back.
Self-defense is
And
gone.
he spent about he had about maybe about 10 years. I think it was like a 15, 18-year sentence. He spent about 10 years in jail. He got his life together in jail. And he
That's
started being an
good.
advocate, gave his life to God, and he actually just got out this past summer.
That's awesome, man. Gave his
He
life
got
to
his life together. But I remember that story, and it really showed me that you what you may think is self-defense, think self-defense. And it's always better to try to get yourself out of a situation instead of engaging a circumstance. And I think the same type of law, unfortunately, is going to cause Carmelo Anthony to go to jail. And what all the supporters are doing is actually probably making it worse on him,
right.
because now the judge, because of the media pressure, she or he is gonna have to give him, probably the full sentence of the law. Because if the judge shows any leniency in sentencing, then that can open up a whole nother can of worms of
Yeah, you have
issues then.
kids running around stabbing each other over pushes and all this and that. Like he stepped on my shoe. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
like it'll get crazy. So I feel like they are going to make an example out of him. They're going to have to.
yeah,
They really don't have no choice.
yeah. They
But
don't. They don't.
they don't have a choice in this matter because like if kids is watching that, like, oh, if I'm getting bullied, well, I just stabbed the kid. Carmelo got off with little to nothing, so yeah, they're gonna make an example out of the kid, and rightfully so, because like a life was taken, and I think that's
Yeah,
what's lost here. And there's been a lot of talk about bullying from the two brothers now, and I could see a scenario where if we seen the picture of him at his when he took his mug shot and his face is all beat up and he stabbed one of the brothers that was beating him or whatever, then I could see self-defense for sure. But there's no wounds on him. And the eyewitness account says all Austin did was really touch his arm to move him, and he stabbed him, in the heart. And you're not thinking, Austin's thinking, nah, and that's another thing that people's not thinking about here. Austin's thinking like we're thinking, like, well, who's going to have any type of weapon? He had his hand in his bag, but who's going to bring, he's probably thinking, that uh, this kid's bluffing or whatever. There's no way he's going to have a gun or knife in that bag. And then, he found out the hard way.
I'm,
Because,
I'm glad you mentioned. So this brings us to another racial situation that I spoke a lot about, is Trayvon Martin.
yeah, yeah,
And so I ended up, and I think back. This was back kind of during those COVID days when we were getting on the podcast. I think it came out around that time. Um,
and before you say, I already know, I'm going to say what I said then. I've said all along, when that operator told George Zimmerman, don't get out of that vehicle, do not follow him, and he done it, I have to side with Trayvon on this, man. I did then. Because the operator told him to stay till the cops got there, right? He took it up on himself to follow Trayvon anyway. I I don't know.
so
And then a fight pursued. He underestimated Trayvon's fighting skills.
yeah,
And
well, I agree with that. I think George Zimmerman put himself in
exactly.
a negative circumstance. But so this documentary is called the Trayvon Martin hoax,
Okay.
and a reporter went back and he went and researched all the evidence and information. Now, what you said is true. Trayvon, so what they presented in the media of Trayvon Martin was false. He wasn't this innocent kid. He was known for fighting. He had videos they found online on his phone where he was, how these kids, they take the videos of them fighting and stuff. He could throw hands. He was known for
Yes. Yeah.
he'll
He can
beat he'll
scrap.
beat
Yeah.
you up. He
Yeah.
was known for that. So what happened was, Zimmerman was out there. He was trying to play neighborhood watch hero. He seen the kid and got into a fight and started getting almost beat to death.
Mm-hmm.
And he pulled out a gun and shot him. Now, what I the only part of that caused, I believe, that caused any type of questioning is what you said, is because he could have kept him out of a situation of having to kill this young man. Right now, I feel like him shooting him was justified. That act. But he could have kept himself from being in a situation where you had to kill a young man by listening. So I'll give that. But the issue that got the issue that got me is I think the facts of these cases, right? And what really happened is, I believe, always up for discussion. If we want to have a discussion about the facts, cool. You see what I'm saying? You can say, well, there's some school events where they got metal detectors.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a football game. I know when I was in high school, they had metal detectors and things like that. So you can say, well, maybe how was he allowed to have a knife at the end? You can go on all those conversations. The thing that Trayvon Martin that got me was that after the fact, after the situation happened, is that the media did not want to release the pictures of George Zimmerman beat up. Like, he was clear, his feet was beat up, bleeding. His face was beat up. And then what they did is that kind of what they're doing now with Karmelo is that they tried to portray Trayvon as this good innocent kid who never got in trouble, and they do that by the pictures that they show. Now, if you look at all the pictures they got for Karmelo now, he's an honor roll student. He's dressed in a nice, suit, and that's the pictures that they promote because they're trying to
Make a good image.
change the
Right.
perception in people's minds.
That's the
And
flesh. That's the flesh
right,
over the spirit I was talking about. Yes,
that's
sir.
the flesh over the spirit. And so what happened with the Trayvon circumstance is they came and they were able to determine that. If you remember, they had the girlfriend go on the stand. If you
Mm-hmm.
remember, the girlfriend was this dark skinned, kind of
Mm-hmm.
fat
Mm-hmm.
girl who couldn't even talk.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, what to me was is they put her up there. They were almost making fun of black people.
Mm.
And that the reporter found out that, in fact, that was not his girlfriend.
Mm.
He got the cell phone records, subpoenaed, and he got text messages, phone calls. Trayvon was pretty popular with the ladies,
Mm-hmm.
and he had all his girlfriends was really, really pretty. And in fact, and I'll send you the link to this. I'll put the link on at his YouTube. He
Mm-hmm.
found the girlfriend, his real
Mm.
girlfriend at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a pretty, pretty girl. And she said that Benjamin Trump, the civil rights leader and his team offered to pay her to lie
Mm.
about what really happened that night.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact,
Wow.
Zimmerman was out there. Yes, he was being nosy, but Zimmerman did not approach Trayvon. Trayvon approached Zimmerman because Trayvon saw Zimmerman watching him.
Mm-hmm.
So, Zimmerman was out there watching, trying to play neighborhood watch. Kind of, he walk over there. Zimmerman walk over there to kind of get a view, and he noticed it. And he said, "Hey, white boy, why you keep following me? Why you keep watching me?"
Mm-hmm.
And ran up on him and beat him up. And
Okay.
that's
So,
different
oh,
than
oh,
what was being promoted. You see what I mean?
no, no, no.
And
But
go
I'm
ahead.
saying, if you go back to the operator plainly told him, though, don't go out there. Wait for the police. If he waits for the
100%.
cops, even if Trayvon makes it home, if he feels like Trayvon done anything wrong, you can then go knock on the door and say, hey, an actual police, not a neighborhood watchman, right?
Yeah,
Because
right. Yeah,
that's what the operator was doing, was protecting Zimmerman. Like, you don't know this guy.
right,
You run
right,
up on this guy, he could have a
right,
gun, he could have whatever, so you don't need to go follow him.
right.
But he did it anyway, and that's why I feel like that's why I give the edge to Trayvon in this, because we do have a right to defend ourselves. I mean, think about it, Paris. Like, he's a kid and a grown man following him around, his every move or whatever. That's not a cop. You know what I mean? Hadn't introduced himself, as far as I know, as about he's a neighborhood watchman, or did he?
Yeah. Well, I think
He
the other
didn't.
issue was
He didn't have. He really didn't have any obligations to answer questions for him. That's why
no,
that operator. That's why he said, "Look, you don't have any jurisdiction over this kid, so you don't need to be out here. You need to wait for a law officer." So I always give the edge. It's just me. I feel like we have a right to defend ourselves. Zimmerman underestimated his fighting skills. Thought he could just do
yeah,
whatever. He got whipped. He killed him. That's just my opinion.
yeah. I mean, I think that is the basis of the facts. And then I guess the legal question is obvious is I think what also hurt was, obviously, the gun was illegal. right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a law around guns. So I think from a legal, I think from a fact standpoint, you're exactly right because those are the facts of the case.
And
He didn't have to engage him, but also the
well,
facts
even
of the case.
it. And then you hear in there where Zimmerman says he was going for my gun. That was his ultimate defense, that they were struggling for the gun. If he got my gun, he would have killed me. But if you're in a battle, if Trayvon feels like this is just some random guy following him around, they both have a right to defend themselves. So if he would got to the gun and even killed Zimmerman, I mean, what do you? I mean, they both. Zimmerman ended up killing him. We see that as the result. I think at that point, you're getting whipped for someone you underestimated, and then you go for a gun, and that guy sees you go for the gun, and he goes for the gun as well, and you just beat him to it. It's still
Let me ask you this.
Zimmerman was in the
Let,
wrong here.
let me ask you this question then. So if Carmelo pulls out a knife
Okay,
and attempts to stab Austin,
okay,
and let's say his brother grabbed the knife
okay,
and then killed Carmelo,
okay.
would that be justified?
No, no, no. That's two different. That's murder. That's murder both ways. Like, you killed my brother, I killed you. They're both going to jail.
No, no, no. I mean, if before he killed, before the so he
Okay,
pulls the
before
knife
he.
out,
Okay,
so he attempts to stab Austin, but let's say the brother grabs his arm, they hustle, he gets the knife out of Carmelo's possession, and
okay.
then he uses that knife to kill Carmelo.
I think that's. I think that's still murder. Cause you get the knife, throw it away from y'all. Like, okay, my brother's safe, right? He didn't get stabbed in the scenario, so he's safe. I don't, who knows what's going through the mind in these situations, man? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and the
But
reason I asked that, yeah, is to get to that point because I think that,
that's a fair point. That's a fair point. I did not view it that way. But I see what you're doing there. I see what you're
and
saying.
and it's not to say it's right or wrong, is that
No,
I wanted to show
right,
how how difficult
right,
it could be to try to figure out from the outside
right.
what's really right or wrong outside of the facts because we don't know, like
But
we're not there in understanding the
right,
mindset
and
and
see, we can't fathom that in our mind. But what we can fathom, if he does what the operator says, is Trayvon still not here today?
100%,
Okay,
100%,
so that's
100%,
why I think he was in the wrong. But
100%.
for the for the fresco, like, I don't know, like, man, that would be tough. That would be a tough one for a lawyer there, because you're in the heat of the moment, and your brother was just spared. You're thinking that the guy's. It depends on if you could prove the guy's still a threat at that point. He's
Yeah,
reaching in his bag. He may have a gun in there for all I know. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Whatever the circumstance is.
I think that I guess to go back to the Trayvon circumstance, the bigger issue that I had an issue with is how the media and even the courts circumvented the truth
Hmm.
to promote an idea.
Right.
Because if you wanted to just go on the facts was a much bigger argument than lying about the facts. So
Hmm.
if it was presented just like you said,
And how do we?
without anything else, it was just presented as Zimmerman was out there, Trayvon Martin was out there, Zimmerman lot he was doing something wrong, called the police, police told him to
How do
chill.
we even know? How do we even know Trayvon was doing the things that Zimmerman said? The fact that he didn't listen to the operator. How do we know he was looking in windows? He could have just been walking home, and he was making up stories to entice his case or
You want to
whatever.
know what I think? I think that think about this. What is the perception because of the music and the culture
Hmm.
when you see a young black man walking around with a
There you
hoodie on?
go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So,
And
so
he
the,
admitted
the,
he was actually out there smoking weed,
so Trayvon,
which is I don't have an issue with that. So he
that's
was
it. No,
outside,
that's an interesting point. You're saying Trayvon was a victim of the culture.
right? Because Zimmerman, because we also got to realize here's the other part that pissed me off. They turned Zimmerman from Spanish into white to make it a white versus black issue.
Yeah, he wasn't even white. He was
It
a
wasn't even a
yeah,
white. So here,
yeah.
so again, if we just stuck to the merits of the
Hmm.
case, like you said, what happened, then we could have. I think that whole situation could have been much less decisive.
Hmm.
And probably wouldn't even been a major story that we're still talking about now if
Mm-mm.
we just looked at the basis.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did was is that they twisted and turned it all the way upside down. So even if you're on the side that Zimmerman did right, they twisted the media culture to say he did wrong. If you're on the side that Zimmerman did wrong, then they still twisted it so that there was no just. If he did
He did.
wrong, if you believe he did wrong, there was no justice served. And if you feel like he did right, there's really no
He's
justice served.
he's in the wrong because he disobeyed a lawful order.
So if you believe that, and he
Yeah.
got off, so then he got off
Yes. He got
for
off.
for doing something wrong, mostly because they turned it into a race thing instead of
Right.
focusing on. If they focused on the facts, you're saying that he should have been convicted of murder.
So
And I'll say,
look, this is all avoided if he waits like the guy says on the phone, right? Cop pulls up, they go to if you got proof he was doing whatever, looking through the windows and whatnot, then you go to his apartment where his parents is, and then deal with it that way, man. That's the problem. Is like Charleston White also had this to say. You know, I reference him a lot because
yes,
he he's more. He doesn't seem to see color. He just sees evidence and what's right and what's wrong, right? He had this to say about, he said that he believes that, like you were saying, it's the culture. Number one, he believes that if that kid feared for his life, he should have went to a teacher or his parents and told them, and they never would have been in a position to have to carry a knife because they could have got the situation took care of. But the thing is, the parents, this bullying stuff was all made up online because they didn't even go to the same school. They didn't even know
right.
each other.
Of course not.
Maybe outside football, like they may have played each other in football, but that's about it.
That's
But
it.
there's no correlation. This was a killing in the moment
Yeah.
where he pushed, according to his brother, there's been reports he pushed him. He went to grab him. He grabbed his arm to move him. In all accounts, he was stabbed. That doesn't warrant getting stabbed in any of those accounts.
Nope. Nope. And I think the sad thing is that um we can miss justice on both sides, white or black, no matter what the circumstances, is when we look at things through racial lens. And
Right.
that was a great point that I wanted to make about bringing up the Trayvon Martin circumstance, is because if you believe that Trayvon was a victim, well, because they made it about race, he wasn't able to get justice. And that's unfortunately what I believe, that these instances
Well,
of going race are designed to take away from truth, because we know God is truth, and we know that the devil is a liar. The devil is the father of
let,
lies. Go
let
ahead.
me ask you this. If I'm
Yeah.
in a seat, the only thing about the seat to me is race. It's skin, again, skin overtaking the spirit in this situation, and black people siding with black people on the situation. That's just because if you take, let's say, uh, Austin's black and Anthony's black, of course,
Mhm.
obviously,
Yeah.
and the same thing. Touch me and find out. Are we still going to say this was a warning, or is this in the
Correct.
culture saying inviting a fight, and then saying punch me and find out? No, we're talking about two black people now.
Right.
No, we're
Yeah.
taking white out of the equation and making it two black people, two white people, if you will. That's
Yeah.
that's provocation, is it not?
100%. And the sad part is if it was two black people and two white people, we wouldn't even be talking about the
We
story.
wouldn't. We wouldn't even know. Like
We
maybe if
wouldn't
you,
even know. It,
right,
it probably would have got a small little
right,
clip of paper,
right.
and then it would have been over. And that's the sad part. I think in closing, is that we live in a world right now where if you are picking a side,
Mm-hmm.
you're falling into the
Mm-hmm.
antichrist
Mm-hmm.
system, and he's going to use these divisions to bring people into the final climax of this new world system.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't clearly see through race, if you can't clearly see through lies, if you can't make righteous judgment, right? If you can't stand for truth and what's right in these circumstances, it's almost like it's a test.
Mm-hmm.
That it's the flesh, it's a test of the flesh, because these issues while they're in their bigger issues, their societal issues, it's really it compared to what's coming upon all of us, white, black, yellow, green, and we're gonna things are gonna get to the point where you would almost laugh
Mm,
that we even spent time having division
mm,
over these things because in them FEMA camps are going to be white and black alike. In those guillotines are going to be white and black alike. Uh, the people who are set up with this transhumanist digital dollar system, white, black alike. Those who are going to be worshiping the devil and the antichrist system and having that mark, white and black alike.
mm, mm,
And the devil is going to deceive the whole. Bible said he
mm.
comes to deceive the whole world. He didn't see I come to deceive the black people. I didn't come to deceive them. I deceived the whole world. And it's going to be much easier for him to do that when people are divided because the Bible
Mm.
says a house divided cannot stand.
Right.
And I'm very thankful um to have lived a life where I've had great relationships with people of other races like yourself. I remember I was in Bible college and a white preacher said to me, he said that God's going to use you as a gap and a bridge
Mm.
between races in a time where it's going to be heavy racial dissension and division. So I'm just thankful. And I'm even thankful that I was laying in bed just resting on the Sabbath, and you called and wanted to do this podcast. So I appreciate you, man, moving in the spirit.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's important to have voices that counter what the culture is saying, and
Well,
and folks can see a black brother and a
exactly.
white brother come together.
Exactly, and we can always do that. I know I can do that with Paris. I'm like Paris, is my guy, and I, the more we can have these conversations, the more we can engage in these, the more the spirit can begin to overtake the flesh in the situation. Because as long as the flesh leads the way, we can't get nowhere, bro. Because you're going to be called a racist. You're going to be called this. You're going to be called that. Uncle Tom on the black
Mhm.
side. If they have anything to say against the black culture, they get labeled a black. What is it, Uncle Tom? Or
Yep.
what? What's that other one? I can't remember. A coon or
Yep.
something like
Cool.
that.
Yep. Mhm.
So
Yep.
we got to stop labeling each other when somebody of the spirit is able to see past their flesh and say, "Hey,
Yep.
I'm looking at right and wrong, and not who's this color or that color and who's right in the situation because of their skin, the color of their skin." We got to get past that, and we can't get past that if we continue to label each other racist. We continue to fight, push back, like want to fight each other over the smallest things, man. Because,
Yep.
like I said, if you take this and make this just uh, if there's two black guys fighting in this scenario, that's going to be seen as provoking. But since it was a white kid and given our history with slavery and things like that, I remember one lady had even mentioned that this ain't the Rosa Parks days, like she was setting Anthony up to be in the same breath as Rosa Parks. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's crazy. That's insane. And that's not even close. Rosa stood
Right.
up for what's right.
Right.
This young man
Right.
stabbed somebody for barely touching him. That's
Yep.
two different scenarios.
Yep.
Like, what's wrong? What's wrong? We don't even hear about this. And this young man is at home. Both these young men are at home right now. If he gets up and leaves the tent, but we can't do that no more because of pride, bro. We can't
Yeah.
do that no more
Yeah.
because this is a white boy telling me to do this, right? No, I can't have that. But like, it's going to end up in a fight if it's a black guy asking him. It's going to end up in a fight if it's two white guys and a white guy's asking him, "Hey, move or I'm going to move you." That's going to end up in a fight, right?
100%.
Because of pride.
100%. Yeah.
We can't
Pride.
get up. We can't just get up and go sit with our team. This is not a. This is because right now in our world, the flesh is leading the spirit, everything in our music, on our television. And that's where the devil can't do anything with the spirit. And I can tell you that because when on the Bible passage where it says, "Fear not, he that could take your life, but he could take your life and your soul, your
Yes.
flesh and your
Yeah.
soul." God is the only one that can do that.
Man.
So if you
Yep.
don't let the soul lead the flesh, then
Mm-hmm.
God can take both of you out like
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's what we
Mm-hmm.
got to understand. We got to start letting the soul lead the flesh, and you can't do
Yeah.
that if you're gonna listen to fleshly music, then your flesh is gonna lead. You got to start listening to spiritual things so your spirit can finally take control of your flesh.
100% agree. Not only what you listen to in terms of the music, what you're watching on the news, what you're watching in the media, because a lot of these voices to the young black men is telling them that white people hate them, white people out to get them, the police are out against them. And what happens is when you fill their minds with these mindsets, when you do have a circumstance like you do now, your first response is because you've been programmed that all white people are evil, right? Are trying to hurt you,
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
causes you to react over the top by grabbing a knife.
Exactly.
When you believe that all the police are out against you, when the police pull you over, now you're acting a fool, and then
Right.
now a circumstance now that creates so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when you keep telling the young black men that the whole world's against them, and then the obvious reaction is to if you really believe that the whole world against you, if you really believe that all white people are racist, then you're going to justify in your mind pulling out that knife. You're going to justify in
Absolutely.
your mind
Yes.
getting
Yes.
into it with that cop or pulling a gun or a knife on
Right.
that cop.
Because
And then the end result, right? The end result is because you've been deceived by the
right.
devil. The end result is he's caused you to do something where you take somebody else's life, or you
Absolutely.
do something that causes your own life to be taken.
Absolutely.
And
Yes, sir.
yep, and I'm glad that you said that, man. But man, we'll jump off, man. I appreciate you. I hope people can see that we got a black brother and a white brother here on one accord, from totally different backgrounds. One from the country, one from the city.
Yes, sir.
Um, but it doesn't matter because in the kingdom we are all brothers and sisters under God. And there's coming a time where my brother's gonna need me, and I'm gonna need my brother. And it's gonna come a real time soon when if you think you're gonna have to go to folks, it don't matter what they look like, as long as they believe and they love God and they're trying to do righteous, that's gonna be your brother, because God's training a remnant and he's separating the wheat from the tares. And all the wheat ain't gonna be in one color, and all the tares are not gonna be in one color. Because God has traded us all in his image, man. And so always remember that we are all traded in the image of the Most High. Brother, love
Absolutely.
you.
Most high.
We're gonna get this video posted today. We'll get it on Facebook. We'll have it on YouTube and Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram, Lost Sheep Ministries. You can follow me on YouTube, Life Conquerors, and on Facebook at PK Cherry. Thank you, my brother, for jumping on, for getting me out the bed for this call, man. Love you, bro. We'll do this again. All right.
Absolutely. Hey, I love you, Paris, man, and I
Yes,
always love
sir.
getting on here with you, brother.
Love
Hey,
you, man. We'll talk
uh,
soon, man. Holla at
did,
me.
hey, before you get off here, did
Yes,
you
sir.
drop 70?